Hello, my name is Katie and I work in developer relations, which is a fancy name for engineers that go out into the real world and talk to humans. I know, weird, right? In my role, I've had to give a lot of presentations, so I thought it'd be a great idea to share some of the things that I've learned with you. Hopefully, it'll help you give better presentations, and it even might you actually get interested in the whole public speaking thing. This is collected wisdom from many sages, not just my own advice. Full sources will be at the end of this presentation, and there should be time for questions at the end. I'm also happy to answer any questions in the hallway at lunch. So, the very first thing I have to tell you about giving a presentation is that you might freak out. Are you worried about the idea of having to stand up in front of a crowd and speak? Here's the secret. Everyone freaks out. Even the most experienced speakers get butterflies before an event. Giving a presentation in front of a crowd is intimidating. You are literally the center of attention. Facing an audience of any size feels extremely vulnerable. But once you get going, you get through the first 10 seconds, the first couple of slides, you start becoming the star of the show and you can deliver your amazing message. But what if they hate my talk, you might think? Here's one thing to remember. People came to your talk for a reason. Not to see you crash and burn, but to learn something from you. It's easy to let the potential disappointment and panic get the better of you, to mess up your demo, to misspeak or lose your place or repeat yourself, but your audience won't care about that. They will see your talk as successful if they leave having learned something. People are going to remember your talk for you, probably not your slides. Slides are a mechanism to help you tell a story and reinforce your points and guide your content. You could give a presentation about the most important topic in the world, but if you deliver it in a flat monotone and being uninterested, then people will reflect that lack of enthusiasm back at you. Slides are just a mechanism to help you structure your content and reinforce your points. You can give a talk without slides, but you can't give a talk without talking. But I'm not a lecturer, I'm not teaching. But you are, though? Your audience is here to learn from you. There's two things they could learn. Something they didn't already know, great, or reinforcing something they already knew. By hearing you present it, it validates their perception on the same topic. And now the most important thing about presenting to an audience, they do not care what you did. You wrote 1 million lines of code in a month. You worked out a way to get clean water out of the air using nothing but cling film and a soda can. Bah. You create widgets to help synergize the fiscal prudencies at Fubar Corp. Yeah, whatever. They care about why. Why did you do the thing? We were never going to solve our complex, rapidly scaling problem, so we created a code generator that spat out millions of lines of code, and this is how we did it. Our users were having issues with the reliability of our platform, so we introduced a new type of testing strategy to help validate deployments, and here's how you can too. What you made isn't as important as how you made it. There is a long tradition of storytelling in human society. From ghost stories to fairy tales, morality plays, sea shanties, and TED Talks, there's entertainment in a story, but there's lessons too. It's great to listen to an amazing orator spin an amazing yarn, but especially for technical conferences, it's essential to have a takeaway. How did you do that thing? What can you share with people that they can try themselves when they go back to their desk on Monday morning? One of my pet peeves is going to a technical presentation and not knowing how they did the thing, because I would never be able to try it myself if they didn't tell me how to pip install whatever package it was. Your talk needs to have a call to action. Try this thing, consider this thing, learn about this concept. You could condense this into a toot or a blog post, but there's power in a story, and the journey you took to get there is that story, is that presentation. And when you give a presentation, you get a stage. This is all mine. There's an entire separate series of talks I could give you about how to market yourself as a public speaker, how to write a proposal for the event you want to speak at, what events are out there, all that. This event might be one that you might be considering speaking at next year. I would highly recommend it. It's been pretty good so far. But once you have your idea and your potential venue, you now need to bring the content, which means slides. You may not have to have slides, but I like to have slides. So let's talk about that. Now we get to the part of the presentation where I start making suggestions at you. These are opinions based on my real-world experience, which as of November, I've been doing this for a decade now. I'm old, but these are also generally guidelines. Once you get started doing public speaking, you'll have your own preferences, your own style. If you have options that work for you, great, do that. You rock. If you're just starting out, I'll be presenting some best common practices. These are generally suited towards technical presentations at meetups or community events. Outside of these venues, your mileage may vary, and I only have a short time with you, so I can't teach you my entire vocation, but hopefully this will be enough to help you get started. But also, as a kind reminder, you may have noticed that some of the talks already at this event do not do these things. You did not notice that. Please do not call out any speaker that has already presented saying they did something wrong according to my opinion list. If you have a talk already coming up, especially if you're in lightning talks, if you already have your lightning talk written, do not change it now. You will thank me later. But if these things seem useful for you, I highly recommend after this event, watch the recording, take notes, apply it to your next presentation. Things to do. This slide is green, which means these are the good things. Aim for an average, about a slide a minute, maybe up to 3 if you're feeling a bit cheeky. But you don't want them to be too distracting. Your audience wants to hear you speak, not the repeated mouse click as you advance your slides. Your slides are signposts for your story, depending on the story you want to tell. You want to give yourself a bit of room to breathe or expand, depending on your audience. So think of your slides as guardrails. Pick one thing you want people to remember after your talk. For your presentations, it might be, I did the thing and you can too, or learn about this one weird trick. You will be presenting for some time, maybe 5 minutes, maybe half an hour, and people will not remember your presentation word for word. So they can only take away a subset of your talk. So make your point memorable. Is it a link to a package or a tool? Make sure that the name on the thing is on a slide, maybe add a QR code for scanning at the end. Having a URL repeated is also super useful. Put it on social media afterwards saying, I did the talk, learn more about thing here. Do not assume the technical or prior knowledge level of your audience. Try to avoid the curse of knowledge. Say you want to give a presentation at work about the thing you're building. You know everything about the thing. Your manager probably knows about as much, maybe not as much as the deeper stuff, but people on your team will know less. People outside of your team will know even less, and such and such. So you're going to need to bring your audience up to the level. And you need to fit that audience. If you're presenting at a meetup, you can be a bit more casual than, say, if you were presenting at an industry conference where everyone has to wear a blazer. But think about the people in the room. A room full of programmers, there's probably going to be some prior knowledge you can leverage. You probably don't need to explain what GIL means or GIL means, although if it's part of your technical content, you may want to elaborate on that. If it's within the general scope of your audience, but you don't know what the proficiency of each individual audience member is, start with those base concepts to bring everyone up to the same level and then expand on what you're going to talk about. You may also present the same content at different events, but it should be made to fit the people in each room. And yes, you are allowed to present the same content multiple times. You do not have to create a new presentation for each conference, for each time you talk. Fun fact, these slides I inherited from an internal work presentation and adapted them and added to them, and then had given it several times for interns giving their final presentation about their projects. I've also given this at meetups and at other conferences. Each time it's a little bit different, but the slides are exactly the same. My speaker notes have changed dramatically, depending on whether it's an hour-long interactive sort of thing with questions during, or if it's a 5-minute lightning talk. Use images to help people visualize what you're saying, where appropriate. More on this later. You can overdo this, but you have all of this space, even 2 of them, so use it. Earlier I had more visual aids, now I'm using words, but if I was giving less of a professional skills talk and more of a technical engineering talk, I might need to have code on the slide. Speaking of engineering, if you have a demo, actually do the demo. If you have something to show, it is great to show and not tell. It is also a good idea to have a backup recording, and making these recordings can help you practice your demo. If you're putting words on the screen, adjust your text to use as few words as possible. People are going to read whatever you show on the slide. Foreshadowing is a literary device where one thing that people won't see when you present is your speaker notes. Notes are super helpful for when you want to remember what you want to say in whichever part of the presentation. I tend to use full transcripts, but you can use bullet points or whatever will help you remember what you wanted to say. And if you look at my speaker notes afterwards, you'll see that there's a hidden message on this slide. Practice your talk. I'm sorry, I know it sucks, but you gotta practice your talk. You just gotta, and you gotta time it. If you're speaking for 15 minutes and you have 30 slides, is that one slide every 30 seconds? Do you have some faster sections, some slower sections? You will not know until you have timed it. And then you gotta practice again. Practice will help you work out what works and what doesn't. It will help you to make sure that you don't accidentally have any tongue twisters, that your flow works, and then you have at least tried to say the words out loud in front of no one before you say them out loud in front of everyone. But you don't have to be speaking the entire time. Use pauses after important points to help them sink in. There is a difference as well about breathing and taking breaks between your content. Did you know that it's very useful to continue breathing throughout your entire presentation? It's true. I always make sure that I have some sort of beverage on stage so I can have a drink at opportune times, like so. Speaking of section breaks, these are things to avoid. These slides are red because red is bad. Avoid having walls of text on a slide. None of you are even listening to me right now. You're trying to read the text. Walls of text like this are distracting because they are always going to be faster read by your audience than you could verbalize them. If I could add one feature to every piece of presentation software, it would be a little pop-up saying, "Hi, it looks like you accidentally put your speaker notes on the slide. Let me help you with that." A lot of times I see big blocks of text because people are presenting their resume or some sort of validation about why they're there. Depending on the event you're speaking at, you do not need to take 5 minutes out of your precious 30 to justify why you were on stage. Your talk was selected. That is your justification for being there. Take that 5 minutes back if you need. If you're trying to pad for time, whatever, it's also cool. You do you, honey. But spending 30 seconds describing the background of your thing can help clarify assumptions about what your context is coming into it, and then you have that delicious 4.5 minutes left for everything else. Heck, I do entire talks where my company doesn't even come into it because it's got nothing to do with the content. They might get their logo on a slide and they might be, "Oh yeah, thanks for paying." But apart from that, it may not matter. Too much company blurb can also be seen as a sales pitch at certain events. And I have seen times where that has gotten people removed from the stage for being against the guidelines of how talks are supposed to go. If the lightning talks say no sales pitches, do not put a sales pitch up. If you do need lots of text for reasons, split it up into separate slides, or maybe use progressive bullet points to slowly add more context. If you have to have a block of code to walk through, try highlighting bits as you go to make sure you're drawing attention to the bits that are important instead of blasting it all on the screen in one go. Earlier when I said to use small amounts of text, this will also help you to make sure the text you do have is legible. The old adage would be, "Can you see this from the back of a room?" Nowadays, that might also include, "Can you read this on a mobile phone over 3G? For reference, apart from this slide, no text on this deck is smaller than 20 point. If you have a demo, do not fake it. People can really easily spot a fake. You remember that talk that you saw where you thought it was fake? It was. And if your demo crashes, that proves you're really doing it. And your audience will empathize with you. One of the best talks I've ever seen had a demo go sideways after the speaker had already gone through hours of AV problems and was presenting on the second available borrowed laptop. But the live debugging with the audience, the interaction made it all better when the live coding worked. I've given a talk where my code intentionally works on my machine, but then fails when I try to deploy it, but it's a talk about debugging, where the narrative is around following the error messages, but it's still important to have practiced to know where it should fail. Ask me how I know. Again, this is all based on possible if your topic does have a demo. Another thing to avoid, do not put memes in your decks. Show of hands, who has any context about what this image represents? Exactly. This goes back to the assumption thing. Memes make sense to people that know what memes are, but if people aren't up to date on the latest meme, don't get memes, or don't understand the underlying reference, then you have things on your slide, but they're going to be actively confusing and distracting for your audience. The same goes for animations. If you have something on the slide that's going to draw attention, do you want your audience to focus on that or on you? Even if it's not a meme, having a cute thing like a cat on your deck might help brighten your slides, but it won't provide any substance. Unless you want to go with the meta where you have cat pictures as part of your demo input, in which case, good workaround. Don't just read out your slides. That's what blog posts are for. You're on stage, darling. You can perform. If you want to read from a script, then do that. But if you just read what's on your slides, you end up saying monotone words and you end up feeling that you are just a text-to-speech program, beep boop. But there is such thing as overdoing it. If you are co-presenting, try not to fake banter between yourselves. It is very hard to pull off. If you're presenting with someone else and you need to have this person say one part and this person say another, there are better ways to hand off to each other. It could be a single word. Their name with an inflection means it's their time to start speaking. Or it could be nothing because you've practiced and you know exactly who talks when, right? You've been practicing, right? There's one workshop I give where we specifically call out a part 40 minutes into an hour-long presentation as pantomime time, because it's a good way to get a little bit silly in an otherwise very long and important meeting, presentation/workshop, to bring the energy up before the final stretch. But it's always well rehearsed. It's always rehearsed. But speaking of things that are awkward, you do not have to take questions. Set your expectations with your audience about how you want to interact with them. Answering potentially complex questions on the fly in front of a crowd is a completely different skill to giving a presentation based on prepared content. Some speakers invite the raising of hands throughout, but they are also capable of handling that. If you want to make sure you can do your entire talk without having a sudden break in flow, then just go and do your talk. You do not have to specifically call it out, but if you do get a hand raised, a simple, I'll answer questions later, thanks. I'll answer questions later, thanks. Depending on the event you're speaking at, you may also be asked beforehand, before you go on stage, if you want to do a live Q&A. It's okay to say no. It is a real skill to be able to reply and have that preparation as well as trying to make sure that your talk is good. But if you do have a question that you don't know how to answer, you can say, I don't know, let's chat about it later. The one thing I don't miss from in-person events are those people who try to think of trick questions just to prove that they know more than the speaker, or the person who would go, I have a question, it's actually more of a comment. Don't be that person. As an attendee, it's good to, if the speaker wants to answer questions, have something ready in case there are no questions. And when you're doing this, make sure it's an easy low ball, something to help them highlight their talk. Don't use TLAs. They can be extremely distracting when used out of context. What are TLAs? 3-letter acronyms. They suck at the best of times. Again, it harks back to the audience assumptions. A Python audience might know what the GIL is, but won't know about acronyms specific to the project you're working on. If you need to use acronyms, introduce them at the start of your presentation, and perhaps use the full term a few times, and then go to the acronym. Teach your audience something, starting with how to use your acronym in a sentence. But Katie, I hear you lament, it's just too hard, there's so much to do. Well, yeah, You can't make a 15-minute presentation in 15 minutes, more like 15 hours. You have to set aside time to prepare your talk. You have to set aside time to practice your talk, and this all takes time. There's a really bad trope of speakers finishing their talk the night before or writing it on a plane. When I was doing the whole fly to a conference thing, I would make sure my slides were done before I got on the plane. For complex topics, there are always going to be things you want to add, little details you want to make sure that you get in there. For the first time presenting a new deck, there's always going to be new things you want to try. But it's better to make sure that you have a stable base deck and not change things at the last minute. Some speakers can pull this off, but when you're just getting started, set yourself up for success and don't give yourself unintended hurdles. But Katie, what if my presentation is boring? People have chosen to attend your talk to hear what you have to say, but you are never going to enrapture 100% of the audience. This next little part is scripted. It is not targeted to anyone currently looking at their phone. You can only speak to the people who are engaged. If, say, on a video call, you notice someone isn't paying attention, there's probably a reason. They might be taking notes. They might be responding to something out of view. They may have forgotten to turn off their camera. In an in-person audience, that person on their phone might be trying to sort out something that happened, something important for the event to continue to function. They might be writing notes or they might be playing the latest gacha game, but there's going to be people who aren't going to be giving you the energy back that you're giving. But you can focus on those who are. When in person, there's definitely those people who I spot in the audience who are agreeing with me, being engaged, and so I'll give that energy back to them. But Katie, I don't know what to say. You always have something to say. How many people in this room work with each other? Apart from those scattering of people, you all work at different companies, so you've all been solving different problems. So there's something different that each of you could converse about. And for those that do work at the same company, do you work on the same team? Maybe not. There might be some in-company cross-promotional stuff that you can teach and learn about your different teams. There's always something that you can share. Oh, but if you mean I don't know how to make the words form into a slide, well, here, let me help you with my easy 8-step plan on how to write your next presentation. Number 1, pick your main point. What is the thing you want to get across? Sorting my socks was wasting time, so I fixed it by buying all of the same kind. Memory leaks were making our product unusable, so we did this about it. Step 2, make a rough outline. It could be something like introduce yourself and frame why you're talking about the thing, share your motivation, how you solve the thing, have a demo, optional, extra things you did, what you learned about working on this problem, things that you think could be useful for your audience, and a call to action, a learn more link, something like that. This is just a starting point, but it can help you start to get a structure around the content you want to present. And from there, write your thoughts down and start making a script. Make the words, put those words into sentences, put those sentences into paragraphs, and soon you got a script, baby. It gives you something to read from as you practice and helps you formulate what works and what doesn't. But just like a rough outline may not be part of your final product, this script that you're writing may not be ever presented on stage. It's all preparation because next you're going to take that script and you're going to chop it up into little pieces, and each of those is going to be a slide. See what works together. 2 bits at a top and a bottom, they might be duplicated and that might be useful. Maybe they should go together. Once you start to have a sequence of events, you can start making the visuals to match what you're seeing. Start with what you want to say and then the flow of words into your presentation. And then you've got to read it out loud to someone else if possible, but a plushie also counts. And you've really got to practice. You have to get those tongue twisters out. You'll start to see a cadence happening to work out what you like and what you don't like, and then you can start to perform the content instead of just reciting it. And you've got to time it. Use a stopwatch. Use your phone. Use the little thing on the slides app if it works. And if you have a co-presenter, go through that with them together and try to talk at a normal pace when you're practicing. I find that when I present a talk for the first time, it will always end up faster than in rehearsals because I tend to get nervous and speak faster. But that's okay, because if you finish early, there's time for questions and people get to go to lunch earlier. The worst is having a talk that runs long. People have committed half an hour of their time to watch you, and then they want to get to lunch. If you start late or have technical problems, still try to finish on time. Respect your audience. My presentation, technical issues earlier were not intended, but it just re-emphasizes this point. And again, you got to practice. If you were telling a story at a party, you would need to practice, but you also are not expected to give a half-hour monologue at a party with accompanying visuals, unless you have parties like that, in which case I want an invite. Presentations are supposed to be a mechanism for you to give focused technical content within a fixed time frame with the accompanying visuals. Practice to ensure you know that you're going to finish within the time and respect your audience. Practice the talk yourself, or if possible, for someone else. I found success with recording my rehearsal with the intent that I could send it to someone to watch it. Might not send it, but I still record it and practice with that frame in mind. And that's about all I had, thank you, except wait, one more thing. You are not Steve Jobs and neither am I, so there is no one more thing. This is a callback to the time that Steve Jobs finished one of the Apple keynotes, walked off stage, and then in the encore introduced the first iPhone. You may be tempted to copy this or other signature moves from other popular orators. They have had hundreds of hours of preparation, thousands potentially performances, workshops and practice and focus groups, and they have their style down. If you try to copy this, there are chances are you'll come across as lame. You can give a good presentation without a gimmick, without prizes, by just being you. Your audience wants you to succeed. They want to learn from you. They are your allies in this, and they're probably really happy that it's you on stage right now and not them. Just be you and all else will follow. You got this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Katie. With the content of the talk in mind, would you like to take questions?
If we have time for one or two questions, I believe we have 2 minutes before group photo.
Very good. Does anyone have a couple questions?
Our questions in the form of a question would be a great practical application for those watching the recording later.
Top tips and tricks for presenter mode.
Top tips and tricks for presenter mode, as in,
making sure, like, you're using notes and balancing, like, reading your script versus the thing, timer, anything, any advice for, like, how to make sure, minimize chance of technical difficulties because the presenter mode has decided to not render any of your image or code.
Practice. Also, it depends on your particular presentation software. I believe PowerPoint on Windows and also Keynote and possibly also Podium, the software that was used earlier in the keynote, has a specific button that when you present, the system will detect what the second monitor is and go immediately full screen to that. Because I'm using web-based, I need to manually drag it all around. And this is why you work with your wonderful AV team and try to give them the swap gesture so you can see what your slides are doing and then you swap back until we're ready to start. But always, if there's an issue, try not to talk about what's going on wrong at the moment. Try to just go, just a moment, and just quietly try to do this thing. And then once you're ready, take a breath and then start. That's exactly what I did earlier. Not sure whether that'll end up on the recording, whichever camera is recording me. I don't know. One more question.
Okay. I essentially have a habit of not knowing when to stop practicing, and it gets a little bit obsessive because I'm trying to protect myself from making any mistake at all. What's your personal stance on when you know you've done enough practice and you're ready to go?
When you start dreaming about it, that's about, yeah. I, like, on the plane over, it's like, okay, maybe I'll poke at slides or something, but when they tell you to close your laptop because you're landing, you're done. You're good. Don't do it anymore. That's about the best I can do. forced reasons to close your laptop as a service.